Hello and welcome back to Charge Electric, and as promised, this is my first drive in the Kia Niro EV. So those of you that watched my little first look at the car that I had last week will know that I was itching to get behind the wheel of the car, and here I am driving home from work in the all-new Niro EV. Now those of you that watched the last video will know that this particular one is the 2 spec, so this is the entry-level car for the UK. When I first got in the car, actually, the radio was on, playing quite a nice tune, and as soon as I switched it on, the quality of the speakers, considering these are standard speakers, was actually really good. Really good amount of bass to it as well. I might show you that later on my way home. But I've only driven a few hundred yards in the car, and already, compared to the previous Niro, the suspension already feels a lot more grown up and sophisticated over the previous car. So I'm driving around Exeter at the moment. There's a few potholey roads just to take me out of Exeter, but it's dealing with the bumps really well. It's really comfortable. And on the previous video as well, I did mention that the seats in the car felt like they were sort of hugging me into the seat quite nicely. And yeah, really good seats. Very comfortable. I've got the seat and the driving position set to exactly as I like it, and it's doing a really, really good job. Yeah, very, very comfortable. So first impressions, really good. And on this stretch of road now, doing 40 miles an hour, I actually think it's got less road noise than the previous car as well. Not that the previous car was noisy in any way, but it seems to be slightly quieter than the previous car. Yeah, I can't get over the difference in the suspension. I mean, this new car is built on a whole new platform with a completely different suspension setup from the previous e-Niro. Now this car has the drive mode button on the steering wheel, so I don't have to look down here anymore to find out what drive mode I'm in or to get to the one that I want. So we've got Eco, Normal and Sport. So the car was in Eco, it's just gone into Normal, and already it feels like it's slightly sharper. And I'm just coming up to join the dual carriageway to a 70 limit, so we'll see how well the car gets up to speed. Let's put it in sport. And lane keep assist, frustrating again. Let's turn that one off. There we go. Okay, got some slow moving cars in front of me on the lead up to the dual carriageway, so I'm just going to drop back and let these pull ahead so I can build up speed safely on the slit road. God, they're never going to join the dual carriageway that slow, surely. Oh, and they're braking as well. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So in sport mode, well, I got up to speed absolutely fine. It's one of the things some people were a little bit worried about with the new Niro, is that it's down on torque compared to the old one. Now, the old car had just shy of 400 newton meters of torque. This one has just shy of 300 newton meters of torque. It's still the same horsepower, 201 horsepower. But I have spoken to some people who were just a little bit worried that it might just take a little bit of something away from the Niro, the lack of torque. But that was absolutely fine. Got up to 70 miles an hour, no problem at all. A little bit later on, when I'm on a twisty road, we'll talk a little bit more about the performance of the car and how that torque difference affects the car. Because the old Niro in sport mode was a little bit wild. The car did struggle to contain all of that torque through the front wheels. But we'll see if this is a little bit more civilised than the old car. I'm just coming up to a hill called Telegraph Hill, which is a bit of a monster of a hill, really steep, 70 mile an hour limit still. There's a car struggling up the hill in front of me. He's out of the way. Just put my foot down. There we go, already 70 mile an hour. So a lot of combustion engine cars, when they get to this hill, lots of cars cannot maintain 70 mile an hour up this hill in top gear. They have to drop a gear, sometimes two, depending on the car. But this car is just wafting up this hill, 70 mile an hour, not even breaking a sweat. Barely any throttle as well. So first impressions of the new torque figure, absolutely fine. Dealt with that hill, no problem at all. Anyway, I'll catch up with you in a couple of minutes when I'm on a twisty road. Okay, join me just as I'm about to leave the dual carriageway. I put the car back into normal mode and selected I-pedal, which is proper one-pedal driving. So as I come off the carriageway now and brake down into the roundabout at the end of the slit road, you'll see how strong this I-pedal is. So I'm on the slit road, still doing 70 mile an hour, still got a few yards left. Okay, off the accelerator. Wow, that is slowing the car down really, really well. Oh, I couldn't have judged that better myself. That reined the car in from 70 mile an hour almost to a complete stop for the roundabout at the end of the slit road, not touching the brakes at all. It's really effective. Okay, so I'm just on the first twisty road. So I'm going to leave the car in normal. This is how most people will drive it, just to get an idea of how I-pedal works and how good this new chassis is. So first bend coming up is quite a quick off-camber S-bend. So 60 mile an hour on the approach. Now just lifting off the throttle slightly, I-pedal's really reining in the car. Into the first bend, wow. Virtually no body roll whatsoever. And as we come around the corner, I've got to cure traffic. The car up front on this lovely 60 mile an hour limit road is now down to barely above 20 miles an hour. Honestly, every time I want to test a car and come along this road, you're always stuck behind someone doing 20 on this lovely national speed limit road. Never mind. Anyway, so while we're stuck, tootling along, yeah, car barely even knows these corners are here at this speed. If he's not in limp mode, I'm going to shoot him. Anyway, so sat here, this car is incredibly comfortable. The layout in front of me is absolutely brilliant. This new digital driver display in front of me is so clear, very easy to read. I've got it set up at the moment just showing my trip information, average consumption, how many miles I've done. It's got digital speedo as well, which is very easy to see and read. And the dials fit perfectly within the space in the steering wheel as well, so nothing is being blocked out by the steering at all. This model has got the 8-inch display. The higher spec cars have got the 10.25-inch display up front. This has got the 8-inch, but again, everything's nice and bold, easy to see. I can see the battery percentage, the range as well. And if you're interested, the battery is currently showing 83% state of charge and showing a predicted range of 211 miles. Now this car now, in the couple of weeks since I first saw it, has done 271 miles. So that's not too bad. This is a dealer demonstrator, so it probably gets driven hard. So it's probably not recording the best average consumption, which is typical of a demonstrator. That seems to be pretty good so far, 83% and 211 miles left in the battery. Oh, that slow car's pulling off. He's turning off. Actually, we'll use this opportunity actually to go back into sport mode. Okay, I'll let the cars in front pull ahead. Okay, I'm still at 20 miles an hour and we'll accelerate now. And that's 60. Yeah, so for a car that's supposed to be 100 newton meters down on torque compared to the old car, that was absolutely fine. In fact, if that was the old car in sport mode and I did exactly the same thing, the first thing that would happen, you'd hear a chirp from the front tyres, the traction control light would start blinking at you, it would reduce power, and the steering would be tugging away in your hand. It torque steer. So that is a big improvement actually over the old car. So although it's down on torque, it still picks up speed really well, but in a much, much more civilised manner. There was nothing edgy or scary about that at all. No fighting me through the steering wheel. It didn't try and spin the wheels up at all. So yeah, that's actually much more civilized. I think people will probably prefer this kind of driving than the previous car, which in sport mode was rather wild and not something I use that often. Right, a little bit further along, there's a very, very steep downhill section, so we'll pop the car back into iPedal for that one and see if the car can bring me to a complete stop for the traffic lights at the bottom of the hill. I'll join you again when I'm at the hill. Okay, joining me just before I go down this really steep hill. It is a 30-mile-an-hour road, this one, so I'm just doing 30 miles an hour now. But before we start approaching the traffic lights at the bottom, one thing I've just been playing around with is the paddles behind the steering wheel, which control the regen. Now, on previous Kia EVs that I've driven, when you pull the paddles, there's an indicator which tells you which regen mode you're in. Now, in this one, so far, I haven't seen on the dash an indicator to tell me which regen mode I'm in. I'm in iPedal, so it is telling me that I'm in iPedal mode, but if I go away from that, it doesn't actually tell me if I'm in 3, 2, 1 or 0. You can feel the difference as you pull the paddle, but it doesn't actually tell you which mode you're in until you're in iPedal. And then it has got a green indicator which literally says iPedal on it. So I know I'm in that mode, and it also beeps at you as well when you first put it into iPedal. Right, so I'm just approaching the traffic lights now. I'm still on the accelerator coming down the hill in iPedal mode. The lights are on red. Let's lift off the power completely. But that's actually slowing down quicker than I thought it was. I'm actually going to stop before I get to the stop line. Yeah, I have to get back on the power a little bit just to creep up to the stop line. Well, that was more effective than I thought it would be, actually. It caught me out a little bit. I had to get back on the power just to reach the stop line. And when it's stopped on iPedal, the car will literally just sit there without you having to put pressure on the brake pedal at all. It literally just sits there nice and comfortably, ready for you to just tap the accelerator again and pull away. So that was really good. In fact, around town I don't think I'd need to use the brake pedal at all. We've just stopped in this line of traffic and it's just sat there. I've not touched the brakes at all. Yeah, Kia's iPedal does seem to be very, very effective. Right, in a minute or two I will be on the proper Twisty road where hopefully I won't be behind someone doing 20 miles an hour. We can actually see and feel what the difference really makes to the sport mode in the new Niro EV. Okay, just coming up to the Twisty stuff. This road goes from a 30 limit to a 60. So at the national speed limit sign, we see how quick it gets from 30 to 60. Here we go. 60. Again, effortless acceleration. Absolutely fine. Okay, first corner. We'll put it into this one. I've still got iPedal selected, so I'm just going to modulate the car on one pedal. So quite a tight corner this one. I'll easily range the car in without having to touch the brakes. Accelerate out of that corner. Oh. God, I tell you what, you can have proper fun just using one pedal. It really does rein the car in without you having to go near the brake pedal. This is an off-camber corner. Accelerate out of this one. Oh, absolutely fine. Yeah, it's a lot more civilized than the previous car. A lot easier to manage. The tyres aren't fighting for grip. So that reduction in torque has actually made it better to drive quickly. Much more manageable. More compliant chassis as well by the feel of it. Okay, into this corner. I might need the brakes for this one. Yep. Big stop. Out of the corner. Wow. I tell you what, the brakes in conjunction with iPedal caught me by surprise then. That was really strong. Very good braking. That was definitely a combination of physical brakes and regen then. It really did rein the car in very, very quickly. And there we go, back into a speed limited zone. I tell you what, that actually, I keep going on about it, but that reduction in torque has actually made the car better to drive quickly. It's so more controllable. Even under hard acceleration, the front tyres didn't scrabble for grip at all. Turn the steering wheel and the car, even under acceleration, went where I wanted it to go. It wasn't scrabbling around and pulling the steering wheel in your hand like the previous car would do in sport mode. Much more civilised. And the chassis just feels so much more grown up and more compliant as well. And the suspension is definitely dealing with the bumps a lot better. It does feel softer than the previous car, but it still doesn't roll very much in the corners for the type of car it is. I mean, it has got a huge battery slung underneath the car, so really, really low centre of gravity. I'm just going to pop it back into normal mode. Let's waft along this road, so I'm back into a 30 zone now. So let's chill out and relax. Yeah, so first impressions, this is really good. More grown up, more compliant, better to drive quickly. A slightly more comfortable seat, I feel, as well. Yeah, it does seem a little bit more comfortable than the previous car. So in every area so far, it does feel a step forward. Yeah, so well done, Kia. Improved an already phenomenal car. I'll just run through some of the other features on the car. Well, again, I'm stuck at 20 miles an hour. I don't know what's going on up front, but I'm in a queue of traffic now, 20 miles an hour. So while we're in that one, let's have a little round off before I get home. Now, the second part of the video will be me driving to work tomorrow in the morning along my regular commute, which I know very well. And going to work tomorrow, we'll have the car in eco mode, just to see exactly what efficiency I can get out of this car on my commute to work. I know exactly what the old Niro would do. And in this time of year, where it's nice and warm, so perfect conditions for an EV, I have been known to get the previous e-Niro, the 20 miles from Torquay to Exeter, at over 6 miles per kilowatt hour average. Because that big 70 mile an hour limit hill that I've just been up on the way home, I get to go down on the way to work, so lots of regen on that one. Yeah, so yeah, first impressions, really, really good effort. Fantastic. I mean, this is the 2-spec car, but it does not feel entry level. It's got a lovely feeling leather lined or vegan leather lined steering wheel. I mean, yeah, the 8-inch screen, some people have said in the comments of my previous video, make it look a little bit basic, but honestly, when you're driving, you don't really notice the join in between these two screens. It's exactly where it needs to be. It shows me exactly everything I need it to. This does not feel like an entry-level car at all. So absolutely brilliant. Well, I hope you enjoyed the little performance test on the new Niro EV. And tomorrow morning we'll do a bit of an eco run just to see what I can squeeze out of this car in eco mode. So I'll see you in the morning. Hello and welcome back. So this is the next morning on my way back to work for the eco run to see how many miles per kilowatt hours we can squeeze out of the new Niro EV. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that I have, with the previous model, been able to get into work at around about 6 miles per kilowatt hour over 20 miles. Now I just need to go into that in a little bit more detail. There are 3 routes that I can drive into work. All of them are pretty much 20 miles, but one of them is slightly slower route and a little bit flatter, and that's the one that I can get the up to 6 miles per kilowatt hour on. So that's the route that I'm going to take today, because I've thrown the gauntlet down and said I can get up to 6 miles per kilowatt hour. So we'll do that route and see exactly what I can get out of the car. So I'm in iPedal mode, I've got the car in eco. It's a beautiful summer morning, perfect temperature for an EV. It's just around 17 degrees at the moment, nice and sunny. So I'll update you every 5 miles with my consumption. So see you in a bit. Okay, I've just hit the first 5 mile mark, and the first 5 miles is taken up mostly of town driving with a national speed limit, Twisty B road as well. And over the first 5 miles, I'm currently averaging 5.6 miles per kilowatt hour. So I'm just going down a bit of a hill now, taking advantage of the iPedal regen. So I'll keep recording until I hit the bottom of this hill, which is just coming up, and just to see what consumption is at the bottom. The next 5 miles of this particular route is mostly 30 mile an hour town driving, with a couple stretches of 40 limit road, and we'll see what the consumption is after the next 5 miles. But just approaching the bottom of this hill now, the consumption is now up to 6.3 miles per kilowatt hour, 6.7 now, because the car's regenning hard just on this last little bit of steep downhill. Lovely summer sun. And we're at the bottom of the hill, currently averaging 7.3 miles per kilowatt hour since leaving home. 7.7 now. So that's probably the highest I'll see it on this particular route. That last little bit was quite a nice long section of downhill. Right, so I'll see you in another 5 miles. Okay, so that's the 10-mile mark. And any guesses to what my consumption is now? I'm on 6.1 miles per kilowatt hour after the first 10 miles. Now, during that last 5 mile stretch, there was a steep uphill section, and a van driver decided to pull right out in front of me, forcing me to come to a complete stop and accelerate again from a standstill on a steep uphill. So that's put a bit of a dent into my consumption a little bit. So thank you very much, van driver, for that. But even with that, I am still averaging over 6 miles per kilowatt hour on this route. So I'm pretty much at the halfway point to work. Weather's still lovely. All looking good so far. So I'll see you in another 5 miles. Hey, one thing I forgot to show you earlier, I was going to show you the speakers on the stereo. So here we go. I've got no idea what settings are on the sound system on this car, but this is standard speakers, and hopefully you can pick it up on my microphone. But that was actually a pretty decent amount of bass, and I have no idea what this is set up as at the moment, but that's pretty good quality for standard speakers on the entry-level car. So very impressive. Right, just as I'm approaching the next 5 mile mark, I think I've discovered another feature that this car has. It must have some sort of cloaking device on it. Just had another car just pull out of a junction right in front of me, forcing me to slow abruptly and then accelerate again. So not good for my consumption, unnecessarily having to accelerate from a standstill. Honestly, what's the matter with people this morning? They've obviously been leaving the house without their morning cup of coffee before getting behind the wheel of a car. Anyway, so far, so 15 miles in now, I don't think I've touched the brake pedal once, and I've had to come to quite an abrupt stop on a few occasions, but the car did it in iPedal mode without having to touch the brakes, which is really good. So I'm just coming up to that 15 mile mark now, and my consumption is 6. I just dropped down to 6 exactly miles per kilowatt hour. So I'm still on target for that magic 6. So we'll see how we get on the next section. So the next section is mostly 60 mile an hour Twisty B road. So the consumption is bound to drop on that one. So the first 15 miles have been mostly 30 and 40 limit roads. I'd just like to point out, if you can hear a slight rattle being picked up on my microphone, it's not the car. My camera mount has, for some reason, over the last couple of days, developed an annoying rattle. So it's not the car, it is my camera mount that you can hear. I'll see you in the next 5 miles and see how we get on the quicker stuff. Okay, I'm just on the outskirts of Exeter now, only about half a mile away from work. So I've now covered 19.4 miles, and my consumption has dropped a little bit on that 60 mile an hour Twisty B road. It's dropped back to 5.6 miles per kilowatt hour. And along that twisty road I had no cars in front of me, so I was free to drive at my own pace. So the consumption has dropped back a little bit on the faster road. And I reckon those 2 cars that just pulled out in front of me have robbed me of probably 0.2 miles per kilowatt hour. It's a bit of a pain. And just as I'm dropping down into this roundabout, I'm still at 5.6 miles per kilowatt hour. And we'll see what the consumption is just as I'm rolling into work in a second. What I'll do, once I've stopped, I will take a picture of the trip computer so you can see exactly what I averaged over the trip. So there we go, threw the gauntlet down yesterday or earlier in the video when I mentioned 6 miles per kilowatt hour on my route into work. And on this particular route, it is possible in the Niro. I'm a little bit short today, 5.6 miles per kilowatt hour. Did have to do 2 uphill standing starts with 2 people pulling up in front of me. But never mind, not far off. I've just gone up to 5.7 miles per kilowatt hour now, as I'm a few hundred yards away from work. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Earlier in the video is more focusing on the performance of the car and how it drove. And now it's all about what can I squeeze out of the car efficiency-wise. So yes, it seems to be just as efficient as the previous Niro, which was an awesome car for efficiency anyway. But thank you for watching once again, and we'll see you on the next one.